So we're going to kind of walk through, we have different perspectives here. Peter, longtime executive in the Yellow Pages industry, World Directories going way back, and you've been consulting around the world. Paul, former Yell exec, marketing and sales exec, product guy, and again, since leaving Yell, consulted all over the world. Brendan works with, or you work with companies in both the local media and Yellow Pages industries, so you have sort of that vendor's perspective on who's making the transition and who's struggling with it. I think that you bring that perspective. Costantino, former Seat executive, moved into the digital agency business. So we have a pretty good set of perspectives here on you've seen companies try and fail in large numbers and try and succeed in probably much smaller numbers, but you've certainly all seen bits and pieces of it all. So let's just start. And by the way, we want, let's make this interactive. If there are any microphones left, let's raise your hand if you feel like you want to either ask a question or contribute an insight to this conversation. Please do so. So let's start out with the obvious question. Why has digital transformation been so difficult for Yellow Pages companies? And Paul, why don't you start, since I think you've had a few swings at this one, but let's start with you.
You can give a million answers to this, but I think essentially you could probably boil it down to just 2 or 3 simple categories. Fear is one. The risk involved has been quite high. And if you think back to the early days, when digital first came along, there were no digital companies making money in the first sort of 10 years of this industry. And so if you were a publisher, with 50% plus margins, it was a very hard commitment to say, I'm going to invest a lot of money in this new stuff. So I think there was the safety factor of holding on to that cash cow, and maybe 1 or 2 people held on to that for too long. But I definitely think there was a fear factor involved.
Anyone would add anything to that, or don't say the same thing, but yeah.
I certainly agree with what Paul says, because the sort of shareholder structures of the companies at the critical strategic point was not conducive to make it. I think there's a very practical issue. I can remember 10 years ago, as all Yellow Pages companies were having strategic meetings to say, what are our key strengths? And 2, which were most common, was that we have this comprehensive database, and that must be of value to us in the future. But more importantly was the question that we have this enormous sales force that covers the small business marketplace, and we have extremely good relationships with the small businesses. I think it's that second point which has a good degree of mythology to it. I've spent a lot of time in a lot of countries going with sales guys visiting customers. The legacy Yellow Pages companies had this great advantage that 85% of the advertisers every year renewed. That meant that there was not really a sales process going on when the sales guy went back to talk to the existing advertisers. Very often an advertiser would renew in a 20-minute discussion. So this so-called strong relationships that Yellow Pages has with small businesses probably amounted to 20 minutes a year. And my experience was very often when a sales guy said, I've been covering this customer for years, and we would go in and the customer would say, who are you again? So I think there's a mythology as to how strong these relationships were. So when we move into a much more complex world, where we're trying to use that so-called strength to sell much more complicated products, then we perhaps don't have, I'm sure we don't have the relationship behind it that we often claimed that we had. I think there's another very close issue to that as well, is that most Yellow Pages companies over many years were at best achieving a 25% market penetration, which meant that 25% of businesses were advertising in Yellow Pages. Logically, 75% were not. Now, a good piece of that 75% would never really have benefited from printed advertising. So, that's clear. But nonetheless, once you move from print into online, that 25% is your customer base, which you might want to milk. But there's now 75% opportunity, where there's never even been any contacts, let alone the 20 minutes a year. And to exploit that 75%, I've not seen many Yellow Pages companies that have done that particularly well. But it's 75% of all businesses in any particular market where we've not had a relationship but are now very interested in digital products, and we've never touched them before. I think those 2 points is the reality of this apparent strength that Yellow Pages had of working with small businesses.
Brendan looks like he wants to jump
I
in.
would just to take it back up a level about why. I think it's not just the Yellow Page industry that's faced this. It's a classic innovator's dilemma. So, it happens all the time. There's lots of examples in other industries. So Kodak, for instance, they thought they were in the film business. And when they first invented the digital camera, and, they ended up going out of business. It happens over and over, transistor radios compared to tube radios. It just happens over and over again. And you just have to understand what business you're in. Kodak was in the memories business.
That's a really good point. And Fabian touched on it yesterday, actually. Fabian made the point the telecoms industry is going through the same sort of disruption and has been for the last probably 10 years that the Yellow Pages industry went through. I mean, I work with a lot of telcos, and they are, all of them right now are struggling to, unless they've got a really strong mobile business, they really are struggling to find their identity.
Okay. So let's ask the next logical question is, who has done it or done it well? And two-part question. Has anyone in sort of Yellow Pages or a very tangential related industry made a successful transformation? And then if not, then what other industry transformation stories could serve as a success model for this industry? Anyone have any thoughts on either of those? Well, let's start with the first one.
Well, there's one very obvious one in the publishing industry, which is Auto Trader.
Yeah.
Auto Trader, for those of you who don't know it, started off as a classified free sheet in Reading, of all places, Yell's headquarters, run by a guy called John Medeski. It started off literally as a weekly publication, basically for people to sell their cars. And it went nationwide very quickly, went international, had a huge weekly circulation, and it was the de facto place where people went to sell their car. And a guy called John King, who was a former sales director of Census in Australia, he came in and took over the business completely, made it almost a digital-only business overnight. And you look at Auto Trader today, it throws off 73% gross margin in a pretty much, and it is now 100% digital only.
And more to that story, because I'm very familiar with that one. When they started the online directory, they purposely didn't charge for it. And so they knew it was cannibalizing their print business, but they said, we have to go here. And they had, almost average MRR was zero, because there was no way to charge. And now it's, up over $10,000 a dealer on a monthly basis for what they pay.
I think from the specifically Yellow Pages publisher's point of view, one that's had more success than most is Parjean in France. And a significant aspect of that was when they changed the sales approach, which is absolutely fundamental to being successful in the transition. Their sales force went on strike. It was such a big change. And I think that's an important aspect, that you have to change the sales approach so significantly that you're going to upset the salespeople big time.
Well, not just the sales approach, but the way you target and pay.
But
alongside that.
But haven't all these measures always been just not enough? I mean, you change the sales force, but it always turns out to be not enough. I mean, Parjean is still...
Well, I don't think it's, I think the unions have a lot to answer for.
Yeah.
I remember when we acquired TPI in Spain, one of the things we did overnight was they were selling, I think, 17 products at the time, and 13 of those were unprofitable. So we said, we're going to kill 13 products. We're going to make your job easier. We're going to give you fewer products to sell and pay you more money to sell the ones that you do sell. And the union then took a year to get that agreed, by which time we'd missed out on a huge opportunity. So unions have a lot to answer for in this as well.
Right, but...
I keep thinking that we tended to delegate all power to sales. Substantially, we have always been a sales-driven industry, all of our organizations are, just focus on that. And the sales moment just doesn't give enough time to the customer to grow. So again, we keep our customers possibly dumb. We don't want to allow them to grow and become more sophisticated. It's great for us. And this is a big problem. Previous to that, our big problem was arrogance. We were thinking that our internet yellow pages were the solution. First it was print, then it was internet yellow pages. And again, it boils down to sales. If everything you want to do is selling instead of serving, you're going to propose your customers what you have, your solutions. Everything else doesn't work. Just, buy mine. And the crazy thing is that we are service companies. We don't have a lot of technology, honestly, because we don't. There's always someone who's going to do better than us in technology. So what we should really concentrate in is serving customers, and we don't. We sell, period.
I was going to add, too, that you also haven't, the job you do, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. and the sales force, if you don't give them anything else to sell, or the right things to sell, you can't expect them to serve properly. And that's, when you look at other industries that made the successful transformation, they've done it by providing some kind of service that was good for the selling to.
I think one aspect of that, and it proves that point. In all the years when I was consulting in Europe and Western markets, the transition for salespeople was considered to be that there's a lot of old stagers that have been selling yellow pages for many years, and they're not the right generation, or they're not trainable to be selling digital products. And that had some logic and sense behind it. And then I moved to Myanmar. We have a sales force of 150 people, and the oldest is 30 years of age. So they're all sort of born on the internet. And then I thought this is going to be a lot easier. Now, a young internet-savvy sales force, this is going to be easy to change.
And all female as well, isn't it?
And all female, that was it. Yeah. But in fact, it didn't change anything. It made me rethink, well, what really is the issue here? And it led me to believe the issue was not moving from selling print to selling digital, but from selling one product to selling 5 products. And that really takes you then into the consultancy world. Because are you going to try and sell all 5 products to every customer? Well, certainly wouldn't recommend that. You've now got to make some choices. In the past, you didn't have to make choices. You had one product which everybody understood. You could show an ad and everybody could see it and like it. But now you've got to make decisions as to which of these products fit this particular category. And so we truly are going into some sort of consultancy process, which we have never done before.
Well, it's structurally not set up for it,
it's
right?
not selling, moving from print to digital. It's moving from selling one product to selling multi-product.
And
alongside that,
you have an annual campaign model. That's what makes it almost that's completely misaligned with a new way of selling, which is like we were talking about yesterday. You come in with one thing, and then you add value over time and build out.
And again, that's one of the other big challenges, because you've gone from what was a very product-led model to one where today you have to be totally customer-centric.
Yeah, sure.
Today you walk in the door and you have to have a completely open mind. I remember when I first started selling, newspaper ads. Before I joined the Yellow Pages business, you pretty much walked into every call knowing exactly what you were going to sell him. You can't do that today.
Sure.
And I just to remind, it's not just this Yellow Page industry. I mean, we have the benefit of selling across, 5,000 customers across all different industries. Newspapers have it just as bad. I mean, as they transform, they lose 60% of their sales force. Only 40% can maybe even make it if you do that. And a better way is just to hire a new sales force and leave those guys to
That's
the
to my point earlier. It's like every measure to reform the sales force has been an insufficient measure, that, as far as I've seen. It's
Well, I think it's a big mistake
you do
that a lot of
training,
people...
you do some this and that and the other, maybe you cut it back a little bit, and it's never enough. I think it's your point. It's a do-over.
Well, I think it's a big mistake that a lot of companies have made, and I would certainly warn anyone in this room who's still got to go through that process. Transformation does not start with the sales force. And that was a big mistake that many
And I agree.
companies
And if I hear our conversation right now, we keep talking about Salesforce,
Right.
I don't know if you noticed, we just keep talking about Salesforce and sales KPIs. And how about the rest of the organization?
Right.
Sure.
Again,
Sure.
100%.
So how about the rest of it?
Well, it starts in the boardroom.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so let's talk about leadership for a moment. I mean, is that really at the core of why this transformation's, I mean, let's be honest.
Well, according to the Financial Times, 95% of all company failures can be directly attributed to leadership. End of story. As the Japanese says, you know, the tree dies from the top.
Yeah, I believe that too. The customers we see that are successful are ones that have decided that they want to make a change and they still want to be relevant to the world. The other guys are just saying, hey, well, we'll ride this out and see what happens, and you can actually see it.
Yeah, that never works. But talk more about what you've seen. You've got so many partners across so many industries. You must have seen somebody's got to be doing it right or you wouldn't be thriving.
There's lots. You know, just recently, I think I have a testimonial from, so I think I can talk about 411.ca, which is owned by now YPG. They started with us in February. One of our partners, executives came to 411, and they hired him, and he said, we're going to bring Vendasta in. And I remember the CEO there at 411 said to him, are you going to stake your job on this? He called me and said, got to do that. And anyway, they ended, in 8 months, they have a $2 million run rate. They went, though, from 100 salespeople to 35. They're going to go back to 100. They went from selling 2 products. They were advertising products, about an $89 to $150 price point, to selling basket size of 2.44, and the average MRR now of just under $1,000. And so they're pretty excited about that. So but it was started at the very, very top. And he said, we're going to do this, and he had the leash to either, do that or hang himself. So I think has to start at the top.
Okay.
Peter mentioned Pajon. They had a very, when, they were taken over by private equity. They appointed a real strong digital big hitter in Jean-Pierre Remy. They took the head of Expedia and put him in a directory business, and he transformed it. I spoke yesterday about Neil Lempert, who did a great job at Zap. You look at what Fabian's doing in Singapore, you do need a ballsy,
What's the common denominator among all of them? What are the 2 or 3 things that they
kind of know where they're going, and they're prepared to galvanize the organization around their vision and take them there.
And they're able to convince their shareholders.
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there are many, many cases where the shareholders have totally different goals to the future of the Yellow Pages.
Well, that was the case in Yale.
harvesting the cash.
So you've got
we had shareholders, we had bankers who just wanted to go and buy more
rest the
directory
case.
companies.
Sure.
Yeah.
And they're willing to risk their traditional revenue source, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
I have to say, I've always envied privately owned companies from that standpoint.
Yeah.
Well,
Like Müller Median or similar, where you don't have, you're not exposed to, honestly, logics that have zero to do or very little to do with industrial logics.
Yeah.
Myself, we went
to his
through
wife.
three leverage buyouts, changes of hands, goals that have really nothing to do with doing something good for the customers, but augmenting the value of a company so that you can sell it off in exit in 3 or 5 years.
Yeah.
We went through that phase very specifically. I remember in Europe meeting newly appointed CEOs who were really financial restructurers.
Totally.
And when talking about Yellow Pages to them, they'd say, I don't really know anything about Yellow Pages. I have no interest in Yellow Pages. I'm here to
Those guys were always short
financially
timers,
save the
though, weren't
company."
they? I mean, the financial engineers they were never long-term players. They were always
18 months at best.
yeah.
And had no interest in
you
the
never
future of
grow a
Yellow Pages.
business by outsourcing or cutting your core competencies, or I'm yet to see a business, a successful growth story that starts by cutting.
No, but I mean, the existing
by
structure isn't aligned to the new business, so isn't some of that essential? I mean,
Look, there's been, and even today, there's still a lot of fat, in
My point, yeah.
the publishing business. But the clever leaders are the ones who come in and the ones that cut fat and not muscle.
right.
The
Right, and do it as part of a vision rather than
and
just...
do it as part of a
yeah.
vision, exactly.
Okay.
I think that's another critical issue now, having moved on from shareholders, is the moving target vision. Companies that claim to have a vision for where they were going digitally, which changed on a regular basis or changed under daily pressures. I saw many companies that had a vision which didn't seem to be very long-term.
The way I describe that is the answer is digital. Now, what was the question?
Yeah, sure.
James wants to weigh in.
Hey guys, great discussion. I just wanted to, if you can comment on this thing when you talk about cutting muscle and fat. What about partnerships? Obviously there are lots of people, lots of vendors trying to supply tools for digital transformation here. Can you talk a little bit about your experience and the pros and cons of, Paul, we've got some stories on this, I know, but doing things in-house versus partnering as a general approach, and where you see that as positive and where you see that as negative?
Well, everyone here who knows me has known for the last 15 years I've been an advocate for the supply side of this industry to come together and partner, and for the publisher side of this industry to accept that partnering is the way forward, because the old days of trying to build everything yourself just don't work. And you and I have worked with companies in Asia and Africa where they still think that building it ourselves is the right way to do it.
But aren't those businesses very much in the minority at this point?
Definitely, but they still exist, that's my point. But then again, I'm glad of that, because that's why I get work.
Anyone else want to? Here we go. Behind you.
No. I just wanted to know other opinions on that.
I wouldn't do anything if, again, it's arrogant to think that you can come up with better products than what you guys have in terms of vendors.
For me,
It's silly. So it's obvious to me. The reason why, let alone the way it ended, the story of Accelero, but honestly, we took the market by the storm because we decided basically to just get rid of all of our products and bring in a bunch of cool products and spin them well with our salespersons, and then transform the conversation with customers from, again, selling products to helping you grow. We would have never done it with our own product. It's pointless.
I would say, and obviously, selfish reasons, I think you should partner with technology companies. But even our company, we don't, that's why we bring in the best of breed vendors, because we understand that there's a huge investment going on in all different areas. That's why, Yext and Uber all are in our platform. I'm not going to handle listings. We have 110 developers, but.
And let me add one thing. For instance, when we launched the service model, the marketing consulting model, we didn't do it ourselves. So we went with a partner. So if you will, we outsourced it, right? Why? Because we picked the best guys on the market to do consulting. They were ex-Google consultants. So they were the best on the market in order to, when it comes down to speaking to the customer and listening and helping, set up an AdWords campaign. And it worked great. Then from a corporate standpoint, we were going to do a JV. So as not to disperse the know-how,
by the way,
right?
I'm not against outsourcing. At the end of the day, if there are partners who have a competency that you haven't got that is going to benefit your business, you go out for it. My point is, where I think my old company made some mistakes is, we had core competencies in call centers, and in back office service, and we started to outsource that, and there's no way that a call agent, in Bangalore, bless them, is going to give the same service and treat that customer the same way as somebody on your payroll.
I think one of the interesting, just continuing on the Google example, within a relatively short period of time, nearly every Yellow Pages publisher entered a reselling agreement for AdWords with Google. Now, just if you consider that partnership arrangement, I remember Google right at the very beginning saying that self-service was, of course, the answer. They didn't need a sales force, right? And then sort of 18 months later, when nobody had signed up, then they needed a sales force. And so Yellow Pages was the perfect partner for Google. And of course, the database being complete from Yellow Pages' point of view, which with Google it's not, then there was two key aspects of the Yellow Pages business, which Google was very much attracted to. And in many cases, the Yellow Pages publishers were engaging with Google, not because this was an ideal, mutually beneficial partnership, but because they were also under pressure to be leaking revenue to find other sources of revenue, even though this source may be cannibalizing the core product. So the arrangements were such that it was very, very much in favor of Google, and not necessarily in favor of the Yellow Pages publisher.
Well, therein
in the
lies
short
another
term.
issue.
So the partners,
Because every Yellow Pages publisher, rather than clubbing together and having a collective agreement with Google, whether perhaps they could have had some power, decided to negotiate on their own, which was that's not just, Google's eating your lunch while you're still reading the menu. It's crazy.
Yeah, but
And you carry all the costs, and Google has no costs.
I know, and you know what? The good news is that Google is sick and tired of us.
They are.
They can't stand the Yellow Pages people any longer.
Well, they don't like the arrogance of the leadership of the companies. That
No,
was
it's just that we're not selling enough for them.
well, that's
I think
yeah.
it's nothing to do with arrogance. I think that's the point. We have, Rajiv, you wanted to jump in?
I wanted to, but I think I'll still jump in. I think to the case in point that you first made on the first question, it's just a comment, not a question here on my part. I think it's a complete leadership crisis. So I agree with that. Name one true leader, and I don't mean a great businessman, but I mean a leader in the Yellow Pages industry, like a Steve Jobs or a Bill Gates. You probably cannot find that name, whereas you had 100 years to create one such big name. You did not. The other thing is that from the moment they started putting display ads in Yellow Pages, that was 1900 and something, towards the end of the 1920s to when I recently saw some printed directories, even the layout has not changed. The only changes that have been brought about in the book are because of the change in printing technology, but there's been no change in the user experience of the directory itself. So you may have added categories, you may have added more categories, but it still stays on yellow paper, which was actually originally a mistake, because he ran out of white paper, so he printed this book on the yellow paper as the tail.
We had a department that even created classifications, headings, just so we could sell more to them.
Exactly. So, but nobody, I think the real problem and the reason why the Yellow Pages industry failed to adapt to the digital transformation is because they never actually knew what the customer needed. They never responded to customer experience.
And by customer, you mean user, right?
Well, the user, yeah. I mean,
absolutely.
Not this bloke who was paying the check.
No.
And I'd say that the real challenge is not really in understanding the needs of your sort of, knowing what to sell to your sort of customer, the bloke who has this ad, but to be able to understand what his customer would need from that ad. And that never happened. Now, why do websites or like engines like Google do a fantastic job is because the product itself actually fulfills the need in microseconds.
Give the user what the user wants.
Well, the guy who goes on to Google gets what he wants,
Correct.
right? Yellow Pages stopped doing that a long time ago. But there was a gap. There was a gap, and that gap could have been used to do a good job. And unfortunately, it's still making money in certain geographies. So even now, publishers are reluctant to change.
Has
But
there ever been
Rajiv, let me point out one thing, because when we talk about Google, the big scary thing, and I went through the shock of having to deal with Google, having to negotiate with Google, being on the weak side. At the end of the day, let's always remember then that in just about any market, if small and medium businesses spend, let's say, 100 million, 1 billion euros or dollars or whatever, out of every 100 pieces of currency that they spend in digital, Google in advertising makes up about 20 to 25%. The rest is websites, SEO, social, it's services. So again, we're talking, it's like we're talking about advertising, and it's just one piece.
It's 2.5 times
Okay, so
bigger.
we focus on Google, but Google is not the problem. Like
Exactly, I
Facebook,
mean-
it's not a problem.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And just to conclude, we are still focused on fighting with Google, but that's not where the fight is. And if you really wish to deliver the commerce stack for the small business, then commerce stack is not just providing advertising and digital marketing
It's a very
services.
small
Commerce
piece of
stack
it,
goes
yeah.
beyond that. Commerce stack is transaction, commerce stack is payments, commerce stack is delivery, commerce stack is service, commerce stack is
Absolutely.
going to educate, commerce stack is living life, Commerce stack is, I set up a business, I need to scale up, I need to make money, who's going to help me? That's
So-
the commerce stack.
Raises a question, then, is the survival of the Yellow Pages about letting go of the idea that you're selling advertising and that's
Totally.
yeah.
Well, I think Rajay's point's absolutely right. For the first 50 years or 100 years of this industry, it must have been the only business in the world that had no interest whatsoever in its user of its products. And it measured the usage by saying, well, if the advertisers still want to advertise, then there must be somebody using it. So there was nobody, there wasn't even marketing departments for decades. And that only gradually changed in the latter years of print before it moved on into digital. So there was no user knowledge, none whatsoever. It was a unique position that we had that was concentrated on the advertiser and how much more money can we take out of it
All media has
than the
got
user.
the same problem. Radio, TV, newspaper, they all have the same.
Yeah, look at
I remember a
television.
classic was when we could introduce colour into the Yellow Pages books, and the salesman would say, if you put colour in your ad, you'll get twice the response. And then when we did call tracking, we found that colour had no relevance whatsoever on usage. So we'd actually, a clear
So
example,
we went back to
a clear
give it to
example
them
of
as
how
long
we
as
were,
it's black.
we were exploiting the salesman through technology, and again, it had nothing to do with the
Maybe it
user.
was sold based on the fact that your competitor had something like color or whatever, so therefore you must have it in order to maintain status with your competitor, which worked for a long time, right? So let me ask this. But some companies in the room still actively in the print business, and still companies around the world still actively in the print business in Yellow Pages. What's the answer to how to treat your print business? Do you wind it down as fast as possible? Do you operate it separately? What do you do with it? And obviously it's different for different companies, but as a general proposition, are companies better off the sooner they get rid of it, or are they better off in some other path?
That clearly is market specific, but
Of course.
but it is.
Well, then pick
it's-
an example or two.
It's one of the examples, one of the factors that
Yeah.
Yellow Pages had a heavy print revenue, which could be a solid base for you to go into digital if you applied it properly. But as the print usage declines, it doesn't mean that every single category or every single heading declines at the same rate. And therefore, if you are properly measuring usage, then you're able to take out of the printed book those headings which are not used in print and major on online, and still retain those headings which you know are used in print. So you reduce the size and the structure of the product. You never reduce the circulation because that accelerates decline anyway. So you need to be able to measure what is happening heading by heading
Sure.
in terms of print usage. And if
I
you
guess
can
I'm
do
asking
that,
at
you
a
know.
higher level, sort of, if you're affecting a digital transformation, what does having print do to that?
Well,
process?
I would be careful about one thing. We used to ask back in the day, but 5 years ago, we used to encourage people to bundle to extend the life of print and add the digital services to it. But there's some unintended consequences to that. What happens is that the consumer or the advertiser tends to still think of you as that that traditional Yellow Page company, and they don't attribute that much value necessarily to the digital, and so at
Right.
some point, then they throw you out for some new digital-only person, so it's almost
Right.
like you need another brand.
Well, they're
Yeah.
I mean, whether it's working or not, Thrive is an example of this, where, they still have an active print business, but they've built this Thrive brand to create a CRM-based stack, a SaaS product, basically, for business automation, and it's unrelated to the print product. I mean, is something along those lines the answer for transformation if you're still going to hang on to that print business?
I mean, Auto Trader did it successfully because they could differentiate the pieces, but
And they
it's
kept
hard to say.
them more or less
Yeah,
separate, right?
separate.
Yeah.
I think Peter made a relevant point. You need to understand your product and where it works, where it doesn't work, the pieces of your product that do work and don't work. One of the things we were quite brave enough to do, I think, in my day, is we decided to give call tracking numbers pretty much to every single customer. And I remember when we took it to the board, there were people sitting there saying, but hey, whoa. Crikey, there'll be people there who realize that, that the book might not work for them. I said, well, great. I'd much rather I found out that first than they then just go and walk somewhere else and go to my competitors. But at least it helped us in the marketing team to know how we were going to shape the product going forward. And in fact, it became so successful that when I went to So Local, they then replicated the same strategy, and they just devised their print strategy around the categories of home emergency and moving home, which were the two categories where we knew, the two contexts of usage, where print was still very, very strong. And as a consequence, you protect your print revenue in that. And for the rest of them, you say, sorry, this product ain't for you anymore, mate. You
and you
go
can
into
also have
something new.
classification pricing
Yeah.
on that basis, right? You can price
The
according
one
to
size
usage.
fits all had to change, yeah.
In my last 4 years at SEAT Pagine Gialle, I introduced stuff that was totally, apparently unrelated,
Yeah.
right? Radio advertising, or advertising in movie theaters. Meaning, the answer is simple. If your customer has a beach joint, and you're getting close to the season to the summer season, what's better than running some good local radio advertising in order to get crowds? It worked. We measured results, and it worked. And at the end of the day, again, we're just talking about advertising. So it's 20 to 25% of the customers of a general, average customer budget. But the idea was listening to what they need and figuring it out. And if you don't have it, you go get it. It's kind of complicated, I understand. It's not easy to scale it up, but the principle was right.
Okay.
I think the problem here is that there is no content in a directory in a Yellow Pages book except for information. When you go to Google, there is content. So three things actually make money: technology, look, the TED model. Now all those three things are really important together. There is no such thing coming into the conventional print business. So there is no technology, so to say. There is no entertainment, education, or experience, and there is no design. Now, if Yellow Pages...
Other than that, it's awesome.
Sorry?
Other than that, it's great.
Yes, other than it's awesome. And the next question is, if your print business is making money, don't worry about it. Just keep running it till it dies. But when it's about to die, you need to let it go. Why would you keep a rotten apple in the fridge? Yeah. So,
That's right.
if some geographies are making money in print, carry on. What's wrong with that? And if some geographies are not making money on print, why do you want to sort of, try and give it life support?
That's right, and that's why you need to know, of course there's decline, but you need to know in which areas it's declined. And when print still has positive ROI, it tends to be in very certain headings. From my experience, it's around sort of up to 200 headings out of 1,500 that still have some relevance in print. And it's reducing, but if you start off with an ROI of 25 to 1, and it's reducing 5 points per year, you're still offering 15 to 1 in 3 years' time. And that has some value. But you've got to be in a position to talk about ROI and to be able to talk about the facts of usage. The biggest accelerator of decline is when the customer says to the salesman, but nobody uses print anymore. And I've seen salesmen just be simply embarrassed by that and almost walk out and have nothing. If we can answer that by saying, well, Mr. Customer, I understand why you say that, but we're experts in our industry. Let me explain to you the facts about what's going on. Yes, of course, print is declining, but in certain areas and not in others, and online is taking over in some areas. And we need to be able to answer that question, or the salesman needs to be able to answer that question in a very professional way to give the impression that we know what we're talking about.
Well, that's why the call tracking example is such a, so valuable.
That's probably why you leave that sales force that you already have that can do that and learn that. But you better, if you don't start selling digital, that when that directory closes, then you're
I've seen customers, as the sales guy walks in, have the Yellow Pages book of 5 years ago, which is big and thick, and the Yellow Pages of last year, which is small and thin, saying you can see your industry's dead. And then the salesman be highly embarrassed because he doesn't know what to say.
That is a tough one.
But
Well, there's a good answer to that, but you know,
I'd
if the
say
sales
also
guy
that
hasn't been prepared for
if
it, then
you-
he will mess it up.
if you're not willing to go and discuss results, measurable results, with your customer after he's bought something, probably you should have not sold that product in the first place.
Yeah, we live today in the prove it era of media, you know, and that applies.
We have to sell,
whether you're in TV, radio, or whatever. You have
measure, and be transparent.
From the call tracking we did in Myanmar, which is not, of course, a typical example because it's a country that's way behind and the development scale to others. But in the last 12 months, we were able to show an average of 25 to 1 ROI on print, 20 to 1 on online, and that 25 to 1 was an average because there were 2 or 3 headings where it was 0. And in
And
the
that's
next, in
why
the
you've
next
been
year,
able to
in the
prolong
next year, we went back and we said to them, you know, we're not bringing anything in print. You really should be an online only. And for you know, that 25 to 1 average included some that were over 400 to 1 ROI.
Okay.
And that will actually add your credibility as the local trusted advisor if you're prepared to go and say, by the way, that's not working for you. I'm going to recommend you something different.
We'll change the subject, because we're in minutiae on how to save print, and I don't think that's the nature of the conversation. So, clean slate, you're starting this business from scratch. What business do you build? In other words, to deliver value to small businesses to help them find customers. What is the business that you create with a clean slate?
You mean with no employees and no history?
No employees, no history. I want to help small businesses find customers. What's the business that you create?
First thing is, open your drawer, look at the business cards that you have in your drawer. Let's start from there.
Okay.
Well, I think most...
Let's start from there, then what else do you do?
I say you build a SaaS platform with
Okay.
recurring revenue, and you solve the problems that the small business has. And so you start with the fact that, you know, obviously advertising, can they find you? You know, that's a problem that they have. But before you even spend $1 on advertising, when someone goes to find you, if you're not online and your listings aren't there, you know, like, well, I'll make the joke all the time, but the best place to hide a dead body is on the second page
Right.
of the Google search results.
And as Andrew proved, that's...
Nobody goes...
Maybe it's on the first page at this point.
Yeah, so, you know, get your listings then, and then once they do find you, if you don't have a good reputation, they're not going to pick somebody with a 1 star. So make sure that they have, and that's not just the ratings and reviews, it's like, what's the website like, is it easy to use? And then after they transact, it's this whole Google zero moment of truth idea, right? So they make the decision long before they ever call you or go to your store. Then they're going to, you know, talk about you online. So you better be able to handle that on social and Facebook and Twitter and Foursquare, wherever it might be. And that will become somebody else's zero moment of truth. And then you got to be able to keep those customers and have them remain loyal. So that's, if you need to find out where their pain points are, start somewhere. If you look at GoDaddy's 5-year investment deck, they have a 6-year plan that starts with foundational solutions like website and listings and moves and domains, $6 a year domains, and moves up an ARPU.
But you start with
over
solving
6
one
years.
problem.
But you start somewhere with one problem.
Well,
that you need to
I don't
solve.
think there's an easy answer to your question, but
Didn't expect
the
there to be.
reality is it's a multifaceted industry these days. So whatever business you do decide to be in, decide that you want to be the best at what you do and deliver an amazing customer experience.
There's something buried
Then
in
you've
your-
got a pretty good chance of
There's something
survival.
buried in your point, Paul, which is that Yellow Pages was a horizontal, everything to everyone industry,
Yeah.
and there's no
Why-
longer a need perhaps to be that, all things to all people.
You can't be that
Yeah.
anymore.
And-
Well, the first fundamental is, are you going to serve the small business marketplace or the big business marketplace? You know, the Yellow Pages tradition is that we serve the
I
small
guess
business.
we'll
But
narrow
if you're
the-
starting from zero,
Yeah, let's
then
narrow it
that's
to
a fair
small
opening
business, 'cause
question,
that's
isn't
the
it?
heritage that we're talking about. So if we're to, if you wake up and suddenly there's no memory of ever having a Yellow Pages industry, what business solves the fundamental problem of, I have a business, I need customers walking through the door, you know, and I think Brendan has answered that.
But
and, yeah,
again, I
yeah.
go back to my, let's say, very simplistic statement. We have made our customers spend so much money over our lifetime in Yellow Pages or digital agencies, and still we haven't helped them make money out of the customers that they already have.
Right. Okay, that was your point. Let's start with my existing customers and how do I optimize them?
It's a starting point.
Yeah, okay.
Not knowing anything else.
So
Andrew,
that, we
I have a question.
Here we go.
So, from my point of view, maybe the world has changed a little bit even more from what you are discussing. So, if you look at Google only, this was the world like 10 years ago. So, the universe changed, and people are now using services like Amazon a lot to go for product search. So, at least in Europe, I don't know the numbers for Asia, most of the product searches, e-commerce starts on Amazon. Young people, they use Facebook. They get recommendations for what to buy, what to do. They go to Instagram. They no longer even go to Facebook. They may use Snapchat. So the world actually has become better for distribution companies. And I think that's what Yellow Pages companies are. Because if you can only say to your customer, hey, you have one option, Yellow Pages are no longer number one, you have to go to AdWords, and you do that the next year again, customer thinks, okay, he's only telling me time over time, go to AdWords. Then I go to AdWords and I can do it on my own. And Google is enhancing their systems, automating them, so they will not need anybody else to manage it for you.
But I think you touch on a really key fundamental that underpins all of this. Digital transformation is not a destination. It's an ongoing process. And I tried to touch on it yesterday in my branding piece. Brands have to constantly evolve. Google's been a successful brand now for more than 10 years. It's still evolving on a daily basis.
Absolutely, but the future, I think, is very bright, because you can now really consult to the small businesses, because they will never be able to keep up to the pace the environment is evolving. And you have now many options for them, and for some of them catering to their special audiences. Perhaps they cater more to young people, so you will teach them to go and do marketing on Instagram and Snapchat. And for them other businesses, it would be very good to advertise directly on Amazon, because there are a lot of e-commerce reliant business. And for other businesses, you might really do display advertising and retargeting. So now you have a broad range of products, and you not only rely on one player, but you have a lot of players, and that leverage your bargaining power also with each of them, because you can take the budgets. If you control the customer and you control the distribution channel, you are able now to leverage that power.
And it all comes down to brand and trust. If they don't trust you, if a small business feels like you're going to take their money and you're a newspaper and you're just going to put it in print, or you're a Yellow Page company, you're just going to put it in Yellow Page, and you're not out for their best interest, or you're not solving the problems that they really have, they're going to go to somebody who will solve those problems. And so I really do believe it's a matter of trust. For advertising and marketing, they come to traditional media companies first, but they won't if they don't solve those problems. For accounting, they go to an accountant.
That's why the
for phone
transparency
systems, they go to a telco.
Yeah.
And so you have to find a way to leverage the trust that you have and then solve the problem the best, and that's it.
I think absolutely key to the implementation of that. If we're talking about the businesses becoming digital marketing services agencies or whatever, so they have a whole series of products that they're able to offer. It always comes back then to, are we selling, are we consulting, are we servicing the customer? But we need some guy that goes to a customer, especially when it's a small customer, that says, let me understand your business. I've got a whole range of options here. I need to understand your business, and then I'm going to make a recommendation what is right for you in your business in these circumstances at this time. Now, how many people?
By the way, that's a Yellow Pages ad.
How many? What sort of profile do we need for that guy, and how many people exist with that capability to take the time to really consult and recommend to that business what he particularly needs? That's something which we don't see many people like that, do we?
I think that that's and I don't know if we're going to get to this, but it's a segmented sales force. You need to do what other complicated industries do, where you have somebody who's, doing the initial prospecting, and then, we call those SDRs or sales development reps, and then you need to have somebody who's good at solving that particular set of problems that they have, so that, maybe somebody, if it's AdWords, it's AdWords, if it's websites, it's websites, and then that person will solve that problem, and then you have customer success people that only are interested in the success of that customer. So if you don't have a segmented sales force in today's complicated environment, you're pretty much dead.
Yep. I think unless there's a last burning point that someone wants to make or an urgent question, I think we'll end it there and go into break. It was a really great conversation. Thanks to all of you gentlemen for joining us. We're going to go into a break. We're going to come back for Michael. And please stay for that, because it's going to be a very interesting discussion about subscriptions and sort of transitioning the business model. So again, join me in thanking our panel.